So I shot this video a couple of days ago, and evidently, it wasn't enough. Like, I felt like I need to explain more. Now, let me say right off the bat, this video is not targeted towards anyone in particular. As I said in the 3-minute video, it was based on a thought that I had after watching a different video. So I'm gonna let y'all check out that 3-minute video. If you've already seen it, then you got to go through this 3-minute video portion, and then we'll discuss it a little bit deeper. So yesterday we was having this conversation about the fact that, and I love the way this gentleman that I've been meditating on his words for the last 2 weeks said it. You are currently living at the lowest level that you are willing to settle for. Now, before y'all get upset about that and that thought process, because it's more direct, straight in your face. See, I listened to Tony Robbins for years, and he always talks about your standard. Like, you're living at this standard, and if you want to raise your standard, then you have to do the work to get you to that standard and put forth the action. And this is true, but it's a very polite way of saying it. Whereas the way this gentleman expressed it, and he was talking about just success in general, but as I meditated on it, I realized that relationship is also a part of this, that you're willing to settle at the lowest point that you have on your list. Like, there's a high point and there's a low point, but it's easier to settle at the low point, meaning that you compromise a lot on what you actually wish and desire, but you're unwilling to do the work, or you don't feel worthy of that higher standard. I want you to think about that for a second. The person that you're with, more than likely, is the lowest standard of a man or woman that you will accept. That, let's say, financially. Some men or women won't accept a mate unless they're making a certain amount of money. And usually that's the lowest point. It could be 50,000, 60, 70, 80, 100,000. It could be a high standard for one person, but it is the lowest standard that this person is willing to accept, and they will generally accept it. Sexual relation. We generally accept the lowest form of sexuality between a man or a woman that we're willing to accept. It's the lowest point. Many women like to see the six-pack ab, but most women do not have a man with a six-pack ab. Many men want the superfine woman, but most men are not walking around with the superfine woman. We settle for the lowest level that we're willing to accept. And just like Tony Robbins, if we want more, we have to set for ourselves a higher standard. And one of the things that we cannot do is fall back and fall prey to the settling for the lowest standard that we're willing to accept. That's that person that you see, they look good, but you know it's not the best person for you. You know that you are deserving of more, and you should only accept a higher standard of person that you desire. Don't settle for the lowest. So now that you've watched the video, and I appreciate everybody who's here, welcome to Coach Renz. And this video, all my videos are either about religion and the breakdown of where religions come from and freeing ourselves from those, or they are concerning relationships and finances. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Subscribe to this channel if you like to hear videos about that sort of thing, as well as hit that bell icon like right there, and you'll get notified when I produce another video or when we go live. So that video was only 3 minutes long, and it really doesn't delve deep into the subject matter. And I want to dig deeper into the subject matter, because for some people, my word choice can be a trigger. The word settling is a trigger for a lot of people. I've had some responses to it. A lot of them positive. People got it right off the bat. Some people, the word settling threw them off. So let's dive a little bit deeper into it. You see, everybody has a standard. And let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, we're going to use a scale of 1 to 10 for your standards, right? Now, let's say your standard is for someone to be your mate, that perfect spouse that doesn't exist, but that perfect spouse would be a 10. That perfect mate would be a 10. And this would mean they are exactly perfect for you. Now, when we say perfect, we need to realize the reason why no one will fit that bill is because there are no perfect people out there. Even for you, even myself, I'm nowhere near perfect. But a person can be perfect in their imperfections. And the only way that they're perfect in their imperfections is when you compromise on things that are not breaking points for you. The person may have a habit that you don't necessarily like, but it's not a deal breaker. When you look at the totality of the person, they're those things that you compromise on is not something that will break you, something that's a no-go for you. For instance, if a person like myself, I drink coffee like all day. And let's say a person don't like coffee, don't like the smell of coffee, don't want to make coffee, don't drink it. But when they look at the totality of me, they say, well, that's something that they do. Let's say a person doesn't like cigars, right? And they decide they want to be with me. Well, them not liking cigars, it depends on how much of a deal breaker it is. For some people, it will be a complete deal breaker. Don't want to deal with anybody who smokes. Maybe they had somebody die of lung cancer. So it could be a complete deal breaker. For other people, it may just be they don't like the smell of it. They wouldn't want to be around it. Or as long as it's not coming in their face. And they may say, okay, can we make sure that when you come home, you take your clothes off, put them in a certain area, a bag or something like that, or spray yourself down with a spray, like one of the sprays we sell here at Smoking Phoenix. It takes away all that smell. You do the thing, you eat the lemon slices, you brush your teeth, use mouthwash, do those things that counteract the taste in your mouth so that when they kiss you, they don't taste cigars. And maybe when you come home, you got to go through that process. So there's a compromise. It's not a deal breaker, but it's a compromise. In that, you can have a perfect person with their imperfections that would work for you. They could be on your higher level, your higher standard, the higher level of your standard. But let's say it is a deal breaker, but you agree to be with this person anyway. Well, now you're looking at the true identification of what settling is. Settling at that point is to be with somebody where your lowest level of standard is a 5, but because of their smoking of cigars, now that person is a 4 or 3. They're basically below your standard. That is actually settling, because you're accepting a behavior from someone, a characteristic that is a deal breaker for you, but you still decide to be with this person. Now you're settling. If someone meets your standard and they're not breaking your deal, there's no deal breaker, then you're not settling in the same aspect of somebody who breaks your deal, who has something about them. And it's not to say that they're wrong, it's just something that you particularly cannot deal with on a daily, weekly basis, whatever it is. It's just not something that's for you. And if that's the case, then you would be settling. What I'm talking about in the video is the aspect of you have a range of 5 to 10. It's very few and far between that you will find that 10 or that 9 or that 8. So most of us will engage with people who are in that 5, 6, 7 range. It's not that you are accepting someone who is not qualified to be with you. They are qualified. They are in your range. So you're good. It's the mere fact that we will generally take on that person who is at that 5, 6, 7 instead of taking on the 8, 9, 10. Now, oftentimes we don't feel worthy of that 8, 9, 10. Let me give you an example. First, I want to tell you, there was a study that I remember seeing, maybe a decade ago. And in that study, it was a study about attraction and how people are attracted and how they feel about themselves. So each person decided, and it was like 50 people. Each person decided if they were a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 based on physical attraction. And so they put that number. They decided that. And then later on, they had people look at screens, and those people rated the other 50 people. And based on the rating of all 50 people towards other people, they then took that number, whatever that number was. If it was a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And they put that number like on something that was on their head, right? And well, first let me go back, because like I said, it's been 10 years since I saw this study. First, I believe the people didn't have a number on their head at all. So they put all the people in a room and they watched who people talked to. And in most cases, people talked to people who were within 1 to 2 up or down from what they believed themselves to be. If a person believed themselves to be a 5, then they generally were attracted to people who were like 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7s. They migrated together in that one. People who thought themselves as a 5 didn't talk to people who were 8s, 9, and 10 for the most part. They strayed away from those people. They didn't talk to those people. They didn't converse with them. If they did, it was very, very short and very, very superficial. Then they took all the men and they put the number of that man like where the guy couldn't see it, if he was an 8, 9, 10, whatever. And then they had the women. The women were instructed to approach and talk to the guys that they felt that they were attracted to. Those women only talked to men who they thought was in that 2 up or down range from themselves. So again, the study showed that the women were only, if a woman felt she was an 8, she only talked to dudes who were 8, 9s, and 10s, or 5s, or 7s and 6s. And then they reversed it, and they had the women with the number and the men, and the same dynamic happened. So we have this range in our minds based on who we are at that particular time. If you feel like you're a 10, then generally you will go talk to other 8s and 9s. If you felt like you were a 1, you would only talk to 2s and 3s and other 1s. And that's how this works with us. That we have a standard, an idea of what we are willing to deal with, what we are willing to be with, based on our own representation of ourselves. So if I felt like I was a 5 financially, I may only deal with people who are 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7s. If I thought that I was a 5 physically, I would only deal with people who are 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7s. So that motif continues. I wouldn't feel worthy of a person who was an 8, 9, or 10 because I don't feel like I match up to those people. If I saw a woman and she was beautiful and I thought that she was a 10 and I thought I was a 5, then I wouldn't approach her. I would think that, she's not going to talk to me because I'm only a 5. Now I know there is a degree where people don't follow that. You have people who they have a high thought process of themselves where everybody else may think they're a little bit lower, but they will only go after a 9 or a 10, right? But you also have people who they know in their minds they're a 5, but they feel confident enough to go ahead and talk to a 9 or a 10. Just a confidence level they have within themselves, irregardless of what they feel about themselves. You do have those people, and the study showed a low percentage of the people would actually only deal with people who were of that highest level. But most stayed within their own range based on how they felt about themselves. So when I said that we would generally settle, and it's not really settling, and now I shouldn't not have used that word. When we would generally accept a person, they're generally within the the lowest of our standards, and oftentimes it's because that's how we feel about ourselves. Is that that's where we are, and it's not a bad thing. It's just how we may feel about ourselves. That hey, I feel like financially I'm a 5, so I'm generally going to mess with a woman who may be a 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. And even in that, as a man, men tend to be more accepting of someone in a lower financial status than themselves because we just do, because men have the provider mentality. So, and that's our culture. Our culture also has a man provide mentality. Although we're in an age where women can make just as much, if not more, well, just as much and more than the man. But we still have that ingrained in us. So we are more accepting of someone at a lower financial standard, whereas women are not as accepting of a man in a lower financial status. I do see more women, especially in the older, who are over 40, who have a mindset that, well, he ain't got to make as much as me, but he can't be. There's a level in that finances that they're just not going to deal with. If the lady is making $100,000 a year, she's not generally going to deal with a man that only makes 20. It's not going to work. Their mindset is they don't want to deal with that. Now there are some women who do, and they don't mind being the primary breadwinner, but most women will not. That man has to be closer to where they are or higher. So women are not as accepting of that, and it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Women have a natural desire to have security, and in our world, security comes in the form of protection physically and protection financially. The lion, the female lioness, don't get with the Charlie lion. They're either going to deal with an alpha and sometimes a beta, but they're not going to deal with the Charlie or Delta lion. Alpha and betas. That's it. And usually they deal with the beta if the alpha doesn't necessarily choose them or after the alpha has done his thing. But usually they don't. We are still base animals in our instincts. Not in our soul, but in our instincts, in this human form, in the physical body. So when I say that in all categories, regardless of what category it is, whether you think it's right or wrong or socially acceptable, we will generally stay within that range, right? And like I said, it's a range. Some people, and this is the other part that I was talking about, some people are unwilling to do the work within themselves that would make them feel like they qualify for the higher standards. Or as Tony Robbins would say, some people wouldn't do the work to raise their standard. Some people, I know men who, especially military men, who have served over 20 years. They got their retirement from 20 years, and let's say that's at like $3,000 a month, $4,000 a month that they're getting. They do their VA stuff, and let's say they get 100%, and they're getting their $3,200 at 100%, and maybe they getting Social Security if they got 100%, so like another $1,800. So the amount of money they're bringing in, they're good. They don't want the responsibility of, they've had military responsibility for 20 plus years. They don't want that additional responsibility of being a VP or being a high end, entering into a high position where now they got that stress as well. They don't want that. They're fine right where they are. They're pulling in like $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a year. They're like, I'm good. And they know that they're going to get a pay raise on all of that incrementally based on inflation. They're good. They're pretty good. Well, based on inflation in Congress, they're pretty good. So a woman who's making 180, 200,000 a year, she may not be accepting of him because he doesn't want to do what's necessary that would attract a woman who is making 180 a year. For him, he's good. So he would generally be attracted to a woman, or a woman would be attracted to him who is making similar money, right? And because her standard would be a man that's making similar money or a little bit higher. So that's where he's going to be. That's what he's going to attract. He doesn't want to raise his standard. He doesn't want to do what he needs to do to raise his standard so that he is attractive to women who have a higher standard of financial income. Same thing with emotions. You know, a woman who has a higher standard of wanting a man who is in control of his emotions, or a man who shows his emotions. She has her range, right? So the men, they have their range in dealing with a woman based on her emotions. We have ranges dealing on sexuality, right? How sexual is the person? How often? You know, what's the quality and what's the quantity? What types of sexual acts are they willing to perform? Does it meet their standard? Right? And generally we accept where we are one or 2 points above, 1 or 2 points below. And I find that many people who have sexual issues, they have settled, or things have happened within the relationship where it has drawn down to a point that is below their standard, but the longevity of the relationship, all the other aspects of the relationship, they will accept it to a certain degree. There is a point, a breaking point where it's not acceptable anymore. But in sexuality, time with the person, other aspects, the sex part doesn't hold as much weight as you grow into it. But getting started, generally we find people who are near our own sexuality, and we're not willing to settle below that. You know, I've dated a person where their sexuality, their intimacy, their sexuality, just their sexuality, pure sex portion of it, was below my standard. And I was unwilling to settle for it being below my standard. Even though there was a lot of other great things, that would have become an issue to the point where the relationship would have ended later on anyway. So we maturely ended the relationship when we recognized that she don't want to do nothing about it. This is where I know that it's going to cause a problem with me. So it was best that we end the relationship amicably, and we did. So you have to recognize where your standard is. And when you do, if you want something that's better than your lowest point, your current lowest point, then you have to first raise your standard. You have to raise the standard of who you are, I should say. You have to raise the standard of who you are. And after you've raised the standard of who you are, then you will become more attractive to people who are at that standard, where that is their lowest standard, right? So if you are a 5 in your health, but you want to be with people who are a 8, 9, 10, you have to take the journey to become a 7, 8, 9, 10 yourself, to attract that person who is already at that standard. Otherwise, it won't work. You'll be complaining about them going to the gym too much. You'll be complaining about them eating all these good foods, healthier foods, and how much it costs. You'll be complaining about how they're looking and how they are attracting other men or women. You have issue with that because your internal self, your internal insecurities, your internal thought process is a 5. And that would create problems. Now, you do see women who are with, and you see this more often than on the other side, you see women who are with men with guts and bellies and all that kind of stuff who don't take care of themselves, because women in that range function a bit differently. They're more accepting of a dude who is, 4, 5, 6 levels below their standard of health, right? Because women generally are more into the emotion, the character, the behavior of a man, Whereas men are very much more physical and much more what's the word I'm looking for? Visual. So you will have that. There are differences amongst the sexes as to how we view these things. But at the end of the day, it is determine what your standard is right now, and then increase your vibration if you want to raise that standard, whether it's health, money, sex, whatever it is, because all those are key points in a relationship. Health, money, sex, communications, emotional support. All those things make up the teamwork of being in a successful relationship. Something I'm still working on myself. Something that I'm still in the journey. As many of you are still in the journey. And if you're in a relationship, it's a journey that you should take together. If it can work, great. If it can't, that's also great, because at least you know, and you can have an amicable separation. So that's more involved, more details concerning that 3-minute video. I realize that some of these videos that are 3 minutes, they deserve more time. And as I do the 3-minute videos on TikTok, if I see that, I'll think about it before I put it on YouTube to determine whether or not this video deserves more time, that I didn't really fully explain it in the 3 minutes. So y'all have a great day. Remember, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibration.